Arknights has been a household name in the gacha community since its global release in January of 2020, known for its distinct art style and its tower defense gameplay, placing a much larger focus on team building and strategy over being pay to win. So it's no wonder that when the open world style Arknights Endfield was announced in March of 2022, there was a lot of hype surrounding it. It's been a long almost 4 years, but the wait is nearly over, as Endfield is now in its second beta test with a release slated for early 2026. I've always been curious if Endfield would be able to live up to the legacy that the original Arknights had established for itself, so when I was offered to do a sponsored first impressions of the game, I got excited to see what it was all about. Simply put, Endfield pleasantly surprised me in many ways. If anything I show in this video catches your eye, feel free to pre-register for the game to start playing as soon as it releases. Endfield really sets out to do its own thing, and there's nothing that makes this more obvious than how the game approaches combat design. Forming a roster of 4 different characters is nothing new, but Endfield goes to great lengths to actually make it feel like you are in a cohesive team rather than 4 individuals. In the overworld, this takes the form of your party walking around with you, helping you mine ores, and finding a place to sit so as to not be left out. But when fighting, this means each character's battle skill and ultimate are available to be used at all times, no matter who you are actively controlling. Additionally, every unit has a combo skill that can be activated after unique triggers, depending on who you're using. With the Administrator and Perlica, the first 2 characters you receive in the game, you can do a chain of basic attacks, Perlica's combo skill, then Endman's combo skill, making for a really satisfying sequence. It also feels super smooth to use the abilities of characters outside the one you're controlling because your own actions aren't interrupted. You generally don't have to worry about switching in order to use a certain ability, which isn't something I expected to care about, but it is honestly really nice. When you start to get the hang of the controls and gain the knowledge of how to pilot your characters, it makes for these great moments where your whole party is beating down on an enemy, and it just completely sells the feeling of fighting together as a team. But obviously, you can't get sequences like these constantly, or it would be way too easy to defeat enemies. That's why the game gives you quite a bit to think about in the middle of combat. Of course, there's your HP bars that you need to preserve by dodging attacks and using healing abilities, but in terms of your offenses, in addition to countering big attacks and building stagger on enemies, you'll have to consider cooldowns and resource management. Combo skills have cooldowns that can be as short as 3 seconds or as long as 40 depending on the character, and oftentimes these attacks can completely alter your combos, forcing you to consider when to use them and when to hold off. Battle skills consume SP, which unlike most other games, is a resource shared amongst your entire party, so you really have to be considerate about which abilities to use and when. All of these battle mechanics contribute to a massive focus on team synergies. This can take the form of the aforementioned combo skills, but also the element each wields. Physical is pretty unique in this game, having 4 different statuses that can be applied. Lift and Knockdown can stun normal enemies, Crush does massive damage as a follow-up to either of those, and Breach increases the physical damage taken by enemies. Each also applies a stack of Vulnerability, which is a prerequisite for the status's unique effects. Up to 4 stacks can be applied, enhancing the potency of each. Basically, this strongly encourages running a mono-physical team such as this one, which has 1 character that can boost physical damage, 2 that can lift to stack up vulnerability, and a panda with a combo skill that crushes an enemy that has max stacks. Then there's the art elements of heat, cryo, electric, and nature. Each one can also be applied to enemies up to 4 stacks, which are then consumed by a different element in a reaction. The combusting reaction does damage over time, solidifying freezes and can be shattered by any physical skill, electrifying increases arch damage, and corroding reduces enemy resistances. So as you might have noticed, each element only has 1 possible reaction, meaning it doesn't make a difference which one is applied to an enemy first. This initially may seem like a missed opportunity to implement even more unique reactions to diversify the roster, but I genuinely do prefer Endfield's approach here. The reason is that because of this, characters are given a lot more freedom in their gameplay designs, seeing as they are no longer tied down to fitting reaction-specific roles. The unique strengths of a character are shifted away from what element they happen to be, and more towards their individual abilities. Of course, it still is very relevant to their kits, as it determines which teammates they'll work best with, but it's not necessarily the centralizing force behind how good they're perceived to be. Double element synergies also still exist, but just as a part of individual character abilities rather than a global mechanic, such as Zaihi's support ultimate amping the damage of Cryo and Nature specifically. I feel that this foundation for combat gives quite a lot of leeway to use weaker characters, such as the lowest ranked 4 stars, to fill in necessary team roles, but also leaves enough room for individual units to really shine with cool unique abilities. I also need to shout out Enfield's tutorials because they are about as good as you could possibly want them. It may seem like such a small thing, but actually showing the exact button sequences when demonstrating a combo does so much to help teach what each character does. It's easy to understand, requires less time spent reading text, and most importantly doesn't require me to visit an external site to learn, which I super appreciate. The second thing that Arknights Endfield does to make itself completely distinct from any other gacha game that I've seen is its base building. The AIC factory system provides a new flavor to the typical resource collection grind. As early as the second hour of the start of the game, you gain the ability to build various structures to collect and process the materials you need. The most straightforward example is this basic setup, which extracts raw materials from your storage, processes them into a more usable form, then transports it back into storage. This should feel pretty familiar if you've ever played a factory building game, especially with the blueprint system providing a top-down view with easily usable preset layouts. As you'd expect, you gain access to better structures as you progress, allowing you to refine your setup over time. For example, you initially have to break ores by hand before getting a portable drill that goes until you have to manually empty it, and then later you get one that runs on electricity and automatically unloads to your storage. I have to go on a tangent real quick because I really like how they handled wiring power. You have to put up these relay lines to act as extension cords, and the maximum distance between them is 80 meters. But when you go to do so, the 80 meters is determined by the wire you lay down, which actually follows your movement. So when I accidentally placed this relay just a bit too far, I was able to make up the extra distance by hugging the wall. This is a really small detail in the grand scheme of things, but it really stood out to me because it would have been much easier for the devs to just measure the distance by drawing the shortest line between the 2 points, which is what happens when the lines go up anyway, but they took the extra time to implement this wire routing system purely because it makes you feel like you're laying down a wire. It's these little details that make the game feel extra immersive and demonstrate a refreshing level of polish. Speaking of which, oh my god, the visuals in this game are absolutely insane. Not even 2 minutes into the game, and I had to ignore everything that was going on just to walk around and be in awe at the snow physics. You probably didn't need me to point this out, but the characters look incredible. You can make out the fine details on the textures of their clothes, the cloth and hair physics look great, their faces are so expressive, and all the animations blend together very seamlessly. They even added some funny idle animations for the characters looking back at you. There's 24 characters total as of the second beta, and each one has a super distinct visual design, ranging in concept from more futuristic, to more military, to more fantasy. Even the 4-star characters, who you'll max out very quickly just by doing your beginner pulls, have great unique designs despite all sharing a similar uniform. And I also straight up adore how activating the duplicates for any character regardless of rarity unlocks 3 unique art pieces to view. It gives big trading card vibes with how I look forward to seeing each's unique interpretation of the characters and how they play around with different compositions. Some banners you'll want to pull on primarily for the gameplay, but others will definitely be a waifu over meta situation. I mean, just look at this end screen after doing a 10 pull. The splash arts on LED screens illuminating the silhouettes of the characters you just pulled is a perfect blend between practical visuals and creative stylization. As an open world style game, of course the environments also have to be a big focus, and Endfield delivers. You'll come across amazing sceneries along with atmospheric events to really make it all come together. Whether it be a thick fog over the horizon or the reflections in puddles on the ground, the photorealistic art style really shines through. And of course, we can't forget about the rain. The fact that you can easily tell the distinction between the administrator's wet sweater versus the rain landing in distinct droplets on their visor is so insane. And of course, the devs wouldn't pass up the opportunity to make the tights extra shiny. Like, come on now. The new Chinese-inspired city of Wuling also goes to show the attention to detail with different kinds of architecture and foliage, so with the visuals you are really getting the full package. As you'd expect, the presentation gets upgraded even more when it comes to cutscenes, but Endfield just takes it to a whole new level. The characters are bouncy and have so much expressiveness, with even the NPCs having what seems to be unique animations to keep the storytelling engaging. I also absolutely loved the clean, seamless transitions between gameplay and cutscene, which never takes you out of the action. The camera angles were incredibly cinematic too, which really get you hyped to see what's going to happen next. There were a bunch of small things I noted down while playing that I couldn't fit anywhere else, but I just had to mention them somewhere. At one point I realized that turning the camera and moving laterally shifts your view of the character slightly so they're off center, giving you a wider field of view. It's subtle enough to where it doesn't feel unnatural, but once you notice it, it's such a nice attention to detail. And speaking of movement, it feels really nice in this game. I am a huge fan of how only the initial dash consumes stamina, letting you run in the overworld without having to fight against a constantly empty stamina bar. It still exists as a way to punish excessive dodge spamming, but does so without the unnecessary drawbacks. Jumping across terrain is also incredibly smooth, meaning that although I didn't encounter any crazy methods of traversal besides the occasional zipline, exploring by just running around felt way more engaging than I would have expected. The UI and sound design are absolutely top tier. Everything is super easy to navigate through, and all while selling the sound of futuristic space technology. The voices of those who picked a certain main character and regretted it have been heard, as you are able to switch between the male or female administrator for free just by interacting with the rock you came out of in the beginning of the story. And lastly, I already mentioned the physics a bunch, but even with all of it, I was super excited to see that you can kick around cones as much as you'd like. I truly am a sucker for minute details that don't mean much in the grand scheme of the game. Do note that this beta still may be subject to changes before the game fully releases in a few months' time, but the major mechanics present show a lot of promise not just for launch, but also the foreseeable future of Arknights Endfield. It seems like there will be a beginner event that will give you a bunch of free upfront pulls so you can start building your roster early, so if the game looks interesting to you at all, I implore you to give it a try. You can pre-register for the early 2026 launch using my link in the description or pinned comment, and the game will be available on PC, mobile, and PlayStation 5. Thank you to Arknights Endfield for sponsoring this video, and thank you for watching.